Good evening and welcome to this Cabinet meeting on the 9th of June. My name is Councillor David Thomas and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. So for the benefit of the people in the room, we're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, and should the alarm sound, please exit via the nearest exit and gather in the car park next to the library. If I could request that all mobile phones and electronic devices are now turned to silent. Please note that we are using hybrid meeting arrangements with officers and councillors who are not members of the Cabinet having the option to join the meeting via Zoom. We'll also be live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Finally, anyone attending the meeting remotely must use their raise hand function when they wish to speak and to declare any interest at the appropriate time. If anyone attending the meeting remotely loses connection, the meeting will continue and you will have the option to follow us on the YouTube live stream. So we'll start with apologies for absence, please.
Chairman, we have none.
Thank you. Minutes to confirm as a correct record. The minutes of this Cabinet meeting on the 13th of May. Quite happy to move them from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Very happy to second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. If I can request any disclosure of interests, if any member has a pecuniary or a non-pecuniary interest, if they could declare that now. None noted. So we move straight into the Community Grant Fund 25-26. Councillor Tyerman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure you'll all recall that when we proposed our budget back in February, feels like an awful long time ago now, we included in there £200,000 to be put forward to provide community grant funds for this year. We were fortunate in having received in Torbay an element of the government's recovery grant funding, and it was that really gave us the wherewithal to put this item into the budget. In looking at that at the time, we had felt that it was something that would be applicable across the whole of Torbay. Since that time, there's been an announcement of significant funding over the next 10 years for specifically Torquay, and therefore we have rethought through this grant funding, and in order to give the rest of the Bay an opportunity to do some of the things that might be happening over the next years in Torquay, we are restricting now this fund to everywhere other than Torquay, in other words, Paynton, Brixham, and the villages out in the southern and western parts of the Bay. The intent of this as a fund is that it provides some lasting benefit to residents in deprived communities. I've been aware over the last year or two of the real benefits that have come out of the Melville project, started some 4 or 5 years ago. And I think those benefits are not just in terms of the physical things that happened round that and as a result of the funding, but the change in the way the community felt and the community had ownership of the fund and what was being done to improve their community. Every area of Torbay is different, and I'm sure that what we will get in applications here will deviate significantly from the sort of thing done in the Melville project, but I certainly would like to see the same sense of community ownership and community participation and residents in the areas in which it's going to benefit, to feel that they are part of improvements in their community. So I think it's important to say that this is something that is there for our residents. It will, of course, be channelled through organisations. It could be community partnership. It could be any sort of other charity, but organisations that will put together applications to this fund. I think the other thing that is worth saying is that it is a one-off fund for 1 year. It would be nice to think that funds would be available in a future year to do something again, but that is not something that can be intended. This at the moment is a one-off fund, and people have to apply for it on that basis. So to summarise where it is, the recommendation is that the Community Grant Fund Policy 2025-26 set out in Appendix 1 of the submitted report be approved and opened to applications in accordance with the policy, subject to paragraph 3.1 being amended to read, the fund is primarily designed to provide support for organisations providing projects of a capital nature, but up to 25% of the total grant funding available may be allocated to applications for projects requiring revenue funding. Revenue funding applications will need to demonstrate lasting benefit to residents living in the communities they're designed to report. So that basically is the crux of the matter. That's what we're putting forward. The documentation is there. I have spoken today on the telephone to Tracy Kabash, who I know has said to me that she's going to read that and she's going to talk to some of these organisations to encourage applications to come in. I've said I will have a further conversation with Tracy to give her my views, our views as a cabinet of the sort of things we're looking for. But at the end of the day, it's an application. We don't want to close off any opportunities to people that have got worthwhile projects to bring forward. So anything will be considered, but Tracy will have some ideas, because I don't want lots of people out there bidding for things that really do not meet the bill and not looking for what we're expected. I don't want to waste people's time. So she will provide some guidance, hopefully having understood what we're looking for. So that's the proposal today. So.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Councillor Lewis, I understand you wish to second.
Yes, Chairman. Very happy to second this. The voluntary and community sector is so important to Torbay, and I think this is some way of actually showing our support for them when we put the 200,000 in. We were fortunate to get the money for Torquay, so it's only right and proper that Paynton and Brixham are given a hand, and I hope that people will come forward. And you mentioned Tracy Kabash, Councillor Timon. With her contacts, hopefully they'll spread the word and we get them. The last thing we want is not for it not to be taken up. So we want to get that message loud and clear to the private sector that there is a pot there, first come, first served, and that is really showing the community that the volunteers who do it for nothing, that we're actually looking after them as well as all the other items in the budget that we have. So I'm very happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Open it up to comments or questions, debates within the Cabinet. Just before I go outside of the Cabinet, I would just like to thank members of the Shadow Cabinet who spoke about this particular item kind of being in line with the Torquay scheme, which is like 75% for capital and 25% for revenue. At least there is now an opportunity for revenue through this particular grant fund, or at least hopefully by the end of this evening there will be. So let's move across, if I may, to the Shadow Cabinet member, which will be Councillor Cowell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and whilst welcoming the grant funding of £200,000, and I acknowledge the work that Councillor Timon has put into securing the £200,000 originally and carrying it forward. I do feel a little bit disappointed that I think we're missing an opportunity. As somebody who was heavily involved in the Making Melville Marvellous project from its inception, when we first published a report back in, I think, 2012, and it sat on a dusty shelf until 2019, 2020, the report on the findings of the Making Melville Marvellous project is imminent. And there's a lot of learnings in that I think we could carry forward into how we can best use the allocation of £200,000. The original idea was that we would effectively pilot a scheme in Melville because it was, as we all know, an area of major neglect and issues. And the turnaround in that community is something that is absolutely astounding. It still has its issues. We're not ducking those, but the times when I was a ward councillor there, it was all about negativity. Now it's about positivity, and there are many new faces within that community that I'm sure Councillor Law would recognise as one of the ward councillors. And I think about some of the other areas that we were looking at, perhaps rolling this project out in the future, around the Winner Street, Church Street, Wells Street area of Paignton that had similar issues, but they've actually done some significant work and are changing the face of Winner Street, I think it's fair to say. And whilst I was reflecting and having a conversation with Tracy Kabash earlier today, it was about how Winner Street could actually act as a hub to potentially reach out the spokes into some of those other communities nearby within the Clifton with Maidenway ward and the St Michael's area because they are so adjacent. And I think at the moment, I don't think we know what projects may come forward. And my greatest concern is that the very target of this funding is into communities that have the least ability to actually work up their projects. The one thing we learnt from Melville, in my view, is that they needed the support, which was actually more revenue-based than capital-based. There was a lot of the work that was built up over more than 1 year to spend that £100,000 or so that was allocated to that project, to build that trust and relationship and confidence. And a lot of that is based on around revenue. I know in the Melville project, there was a community builder that was supported from part of that funding to actually encourage that because they've got the skill sets to bring people together. And the lasting legacy that we expected from that project, as indeed this fund, is sustainability and long-term community improvements. And some of those can be low-hanging fruit in terms of just improving some of the street scene, whether it's the grass verges, whether it's hanging baskets, planters, whatever it may be. But if you get community ownership, and that is what they're asking for, and then that's where some of the capital can be spent. But without that major revenue support for some of these projects, they will end up as short-term, one-off solutions. So I would urge that as part of the process following tonight's decision, that Councillor Timon and others do meet with Tracy Kabash and others from that sector, because they have the experience, so that we can absolutely maximise the benefit of this 200,000 funding. It would be great if we could have confidence of securing future funding. We just don't know that. Maybe we'll get a better idea on Wednesday after the comprehensive spending review. And just a final comment about the policy itself and the criteria. It feels quite corporate as opposed to people-focused. And I think maybe some of the discussions that may ensue, if that is what happens, we can actually make sure that we do switch that emphasis so people have the confidence and understanding of what the opportunities are that emerge from this fund. I actually think £40,000 isn't a lot of money for some of these areas, and two or three larger funded projects may actually have a more sustainable, long-lasting impact. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move outside of the room and go to the virtual room. Invite Councillor Law. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and sorry I'm not with you in person. I thought I'd spare you my bugs. Actually, I think Councillor Carroll has covered an awful lot of what I was going to say. Just a couple of points, though, I'd like to stress on that. The Melville project, of course, ran over about 3 years, and it had that £100,000 funding pot, of which 70,000 was actually spent of it. So it is about it had that longevity in it, and I think it was the security of that funding into the future. And don't get me wrong, I fully support this that's before us today. And the other thing I'd like to echo would be around the tone of it, as Councillor Cowell said, as this is aimed at our communities and our VCS, some of it is very, very council speak around that. And if we are going down that VCS and we're talking with Tracy, I would really, really urge you to pick the brains of Melville community builder, who was on the ground and did so much of the work with what we did in the Making Melville Marvellous project. Kerry is an absolute boon to any community, but to be able to share that with other communities would be absolutely fantastic, because Kerry absolutely gets how to work with those deprived communities where there's a lot of turnover to them. And I think I will leave it there, because I think Councillor Cowell covered absolutely everything. So thank you. Oh, and thank you for that amendment, by the way, to the recommendations around the capital to mirror the neighbourhood fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to move back to Councillor Timon.
Just one thing I thought I'd add, and I heard, I think it was Councillor Lewis said, we hope we get the applications. Tracy Kapash has suggested she thinks we'll be inundated with them. So I'm sorry to those people who've got to assess them all if they're inundated with them. But if that does happen, I do think it does show the wish for communities to do things to improve their areas, to improve the conditions and areas where they live. So I don't think we should be disappointed if there's a lot of work to do to sift through a lot of applications, though I hope they're relevant.
Thank you very much indeed, in which case we will move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, which is the Budget Monitoring 24-25 Q4 Outturn. Councillor Timon.
Thank you. 2 items on the agenda, and they both seem to be here for me to present. The way it goes sometimes. The Revenue Outturn report for the last financial year, for the financial year 2024-2025, is before you. We discussed this at overview and scrutiny last week, and under questioning there, I think we looked at various topics within there. I don't intend to go through too much of it again, but I think it is very gratifying to see 2 or 3 aspects of it. The first thing is that there were no real surprises in Q4. Most of the trends that were occurring in under or overspend had been forecast in Q3. That feels to me that our officers were in good communication with our financial colleagues, telling them what was going on, and I really think it's nice to have no significant surprises when it comes to your year end. The situation is, in fact, quite a little bit better than we saw at Q3, but if colleagues remember, I forecast that it probably would be, and so it's nice to see that's the position. In terms of the underspend of 351,000 that has appeared or been published here, it is a tiny proportion, percentage-wise, of the council's overall budget. To have an underspend, and that, I think, shows a very good budgetary control throughout the organisation, and I commend that, and I commend the fact we didn't have to go through any major hoops and hurdles towards year end to get to that position, whereas I've known in the past when that's been exactly what's happened. So under control, finances being looked after, I think probably for a succession of years, certainly the 2 years that I've been back in doing this job, but I think the year or two before that certainly as well, things have looked comfortable in Torbay's accounts. Long may it continue. Coming back to ONS, there was one suggestion was brought forward in terms of what was done with the surplus that was not on the list that we had put forward as a tentative list, an indicative list of the sort of things that officers had talked to us about what we could reinvest the 351,000 back into. The one thing being put forward by scrutiny of note was that we should update condition surveys. In fact, I think the original idea was to carry out condition surveys for community centres, because that may well help community centres put in funding requests to improve them. And that could certainly be very relevant to some of the funding that's available in the Torquay deal. It could be available for completely external funding grants as well. Having done some investigations since, or at the meeting and since, we found that a survey had been done not many years ago, so it probably will be perfectly satisfactory to update the condition surveys, and that is what we're intending to do, which would be done at very much cheaper cost than starting again. We are investigating how much that cost might be at the moment, but we will carry that out to provide that background information. So that will go into the final proposals that we talk about at Council in July. So we noted that the Overview and Scrutiny Board notes other suggested items put forward, and they welcome further discussion, but broadly I think the Overview and Scrutiny Board felt that most of those, or if not all of those ideas, had merit, and we therefore need to put together a final position. So the recommendation before you today is that the Cabinet considers the recommendations of the Overview and Scrutiny Board as set out below, that Cabinet be recommended to allocate an appropriate amount of funding from the year-end surplus to update condition surveys for community centres to help them with grant funding applications, and to note that the Overview and Scrutiny Board notes the suggested items put forward by the Cabinet for the year-end surplus and welcomes further discussions at the Cabinet and Council meetings. And 1.2, that the Cabinet recommends to Council that the Council notes the revenue outturn position and that the £351,000 year-end surplus be transferred into a specific reserve to be allocated across priority initiatives to be determined by full Council on the 24th of July 2025, and that Council approves the revisions to the capital investment plan as set out in Appendix 1 to the submitted report. So at the moment those recommendations do not state what the amounts are on the different things. We have...
Councillor Simon, maybe I could... you did have that particular recommendation in front of you.
I don't have that in front of me.
My apologies.
That would be useful.
My apologies.
I was seeking that. So The
Start again
following-
from,
so we're talking here about transferred into a specific reserve to be allocated across the following indicative priority initiatives. Updated condition surveys of community centres, circa £10,000. Better resident communications, circa £50,000. Accelerate adult social care, CMS, Paris replacement, circa £50,000. Support VCSE youth provision, transitional arrangements, pending a procurement, circa £50,000. Events, ice skating rink, circa £40,000. Operation Brighter Bay, circa £81,000. Operation Town Centres improving CCTV, circa £40,000. And an enterprise fund, Town Centre, £30,000. Those are indicative figures. We may need to change them slightly, particularly when we get a firm figure for what it will cost to update the community condition surveys, community centre condition surveys. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. I'm delighted to second this. And so a lot of work has gone into the £351,000 that we have as an underspend. And we dwindled down, we managed to get it down to 470,000, which we presented to overview and scrutiny last week. There was the recommendation for community centres, which we've included. But I thought it would be useful to just effectively invite Cabinet members to talk a little bit about what each of these headline items mean. So thank you to Councillor Timon. He's spoken about the condition surveys of the community centres. And the reason we put circa amounts in these is because we need to know exactly how much each one costs, but it's going into a separate reserve to enable, we've got no more than 351, but this is the areas that we'll be spending on. So we've spoken about the condition centres. I think item 2 is basically, we have communicated regularly with our residents through our engagement of events that we have every other month at different parts across the bay and in different locations. And a message that comes back regularly is, we didn't know that was happening. We didn't know that was happening. Or how can we find out about this? How can we find out about that? Therefore, we do want to increase our communications to our residents to get that message out about what's happening across the bay. And that is a circa figure of £50,000. If we move on to adult social care, I will invite Councillor Tranter to explain a little bit about that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first one, sorry, did you have an order you wanted me to go in? No. Okay. For the Paris system, the £50,000 will be for additional data analysis to support the adult social care management system upgrade. We need to increase pace for this, as it was a weakness that was recognised when we had our LGA peer review, and it will come up in our very, very soon an upcoming CQC inspection as a Paris system that is not fit for purpose. So that is the first one. The second one is £40,000 for Operation Town Centre, which is the tree clearing around CCTV areas and to keep the area open, hopefully reduce some of the antisocial behaviour that's going on. And then a quarterly community blitz for Castle Circus. And we want to get Swissco, the community, the local community and the voluntary sector all involved with that, with weed clearing, litter picking, graffiti removal and a general tidy up to keep that as a constant place that's been upgraded, cleaned And I'd just hopefully like to get as much of the community involved with that as possible as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move across to Councillor By, Youth Provision.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you also to Councillor Tyman and professional colleagues. We must be the envy of town halls and councils up and down the land to have this £350,000 for new or additional worthwhile initiatives. There are councils that we know who are finding it very hard to balance their books. So I'm very pleased to say that included in this list, and hopefully colleagues will support, is £50,000 for additional youth provision to work with the voluntary and community sectors so that we will go to a procurement. The idea being to have a focus on enhanced youth activity in those neighbourhoods, sad to say, where last year we noted a spike in youth offending, and to target the activities at older youngsters, if that makes sense. It sounds like a contradiction. And I think the idea of transitional arrangements, and that is to encourage a successful transition to secondary school through the holidays. So to have a sort of grown-up half programme, the holiday and food activities, which has been targeted mostly at youngsters at primary schools, to be looking at slightly older cohort. I know when I described what was intended at an earlier meeting, and what I said was then refined by our director, Nancy Meehan, but I hope that I've got the gist of it. It's absolutely for youth provision, older youngsters, to work with the voluntary community sector and to target those areas where there's been a spike in youth offending. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move across to Councillor Jackie Thomas for events.
Thank you, Chair. So following on from last year's really successful event, the Bay of Lights and the video mapping on the Tor Abbey building, I have had aspirations to have an ice skating rink, and so some of the underspend would be very welcome to spend on this scheme. This will considerably increase our winter wonderland experience and encourage even more footfall into our bay, especially as it's in the shoulder season. This will also hopefully help visitors stay longer, therefore increasing bookings in our hotels, restaurants, cafes, and obviously contributing to our economy. So hopefully this is a very exciting addition to this Bay of Lights offering and will be supported. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Move across to Councillor Billings, Operation Brighter Bay.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to endorse the comments of Councillor By in terms of congratulating Councillor Tyman first in his diligent approach to this. This has enabled this money to be identified. There are three areas within Brighter Bay which I would like to suggest are very worthwhile recipients of these additional monies. The first one is to put monies towards a weed ripper. A weed ripper is a specialised road sweeper that has a wire brush on it that enables us to tackle the heavy weed burden that over years of lack of investment in our pavements and the gutters around the bay has allowed an established weed burden to become present. Now, we have teams out with quad bikes that deploy weed killer, but the product that we use as a council to be environmentally friendly is a very small droplet product. It's not the heavy sprays that, for example, a farmer would use or you'd use in industry. And so to tackle a very advanced, established weed profile, it's very difficult to do that without mechanical intervention first to push back on that established growth. That would be the first area. We have already invested in a weed ripper, but with approximately 350 miles of highway in the bay, and recognising to do it properly, you can need up to 6 to 8 passes per mile of road, recognising you've got various contact points where that brush would need to be, the back edge of the pavement, the joint between the pavement and the curbstone, the bottom of the curbstone and the road gutter, and then maybe a central reservation section, and the same on the opposite side. Sort of productivity is not where it could be and where I'd like to get it for our residents. Moving on, and also keeping the theme, around our town centres, we've been undertaking regular cleaning of our pavements and increased the level of frequency which that's undertaken. However, there's only been a limited frequency of deep cleaning, which is where we would take a high pressure jet wash that is using hot water and some detergents to really eat into the established detritus and dirt that's on our pavements. And putting more resource towards that team would greatly assist the extent to which we were able to make the high streets and our main town centre areas look as appealing as they could be. And then the third area that I've circulated with the overview and scrutiny, and also colleagues, would be on the line painting. We've set out that we really wanted to bring this back into the progress which our residents expect. We're still going through essential safety line painting areas. We hope to get on to the more residential ones in due course going into next year, and therefore more money to increase capacity in this, bringing in external contractors would enable that to be done quicker, and there would be obvious improvements in the use of the highway network and improving safety from that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And finally, the Enterprise Fund, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Enterprise Fund, we have a fund, this is adding to it, 30,000 we're proposing. And what the messages we're getting back is a lot of people who own shops are finding it, small shops, are finding it difficult to maintain their shops. So there would be a fund for those existing shop owners to do up their property. And more importantly, those people who have started small businesses working from home, helping them to get into, take over a shop and make the town centres more vibrant. And in addition to that, some money for startups, so small businesses, small amount of money, probably match funded all of these. We're waiting for the paper to come through, but it is exciting. It will be an exciting fund where people can pitch in and have our support. And it's what we've been told, that the high streets need clearing up. And if we can help in some little way, so much the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Cabinet members. Going to move outside of the Cabinet and invite the Shadow Cabinet member, Councillor Cowell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I would start by recognising the huge contribution and work across all members of Torbay Council staff to ensure that our budgets are under control. And Councillor Timon did allude to the perhaps the last 2 years of the previous administration. I think it was actually from day one when we started seriously addressing the issues of the pressures on children's services that started to free up spend, so we weren't constantly having to go through reviews of their budget to uplift them year on year. And I think as a result of getting children's services right, which is most importantly to the benefit of the children themselves, we are in that stronger position, together of course with a successful ICO, both of which are cornerstones of the reason why we have to put Torbay first when it comes to the local government reorganisation proposals. And having that sound financial footing is reason enough, in my view, to express to government that Torbay isn't a tiny, inefficient, unsustainable unitary authority, but quite the opposite. We're fleet of foot. In terms of the allocations, it's interesting to see that that list that Cabinet members have expanded upon in the last 10-15 minutes isn't in any of the paperwork, which would have been helpful to the opposition ahead of tonight. But having taken a couple notes, I have noted, and I would ask that the original proposals included £90,000 for IT and revenue and benefits. That seems to be the one that's fallen off the side at this stage. And again, when we talk about the Brighter Bay, increasingly, I think there's a feeling that the Brighter Bay is, again, historically just the seafront and town centre areas. Many of our community areas, when we first started purchasing equipment for Swissco, back in sort of the 2020-21 period, after they were formed, and we established that the state of the equipment we inherited from Tor 2 was beyond any usefulness, that the intention was to be able to use that equipment within our secondary shopping centres as well as into some of our community areas. And I would hope that Swissco would programme that in with the additional kit that they benefit from. One of the other small things we did, and it was only a tiny amount of money at the time, I think it was may have been 10k or perhaps 20k, was to have the ability to replace street names. People often think that when they see street plates and road names, that they're just dirty. They're not. They're delaminating, which means that they need to be replaced. And there has been quite a significant number that have been replaced, but there are many, many street names that would make a big difference to our communities. It just actually starts ensuring that we have pride in communities. So hopefully maybe some of that Brighter Bay could actually start reaching in our residential areas as well. I always welcome investment in enterprise. I'm not sure how far 30,000 will actually go, and I will await the details of that report as to how that fund will operate with keen interest. But overall, again, you know, the Outturn, and I pay credit to Malcolm and Ian and Alan, Councillor Timon, for their work around this. And of course, fortunately, there were some better local government settlement numbers in December last year. That's actually helped ease the pressure on our budgets. But I totally take the point that Torbay has a very sound financial footing, and long may it continue. And let's hope that we have some good news for local government spending on Wednesday in the comprehensive spending review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Come back inside the Cabinet. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was identified at overview and scrutiny that it would be helpful in due course to provide further clarity about the step change that Brighter Bay is providing across the whole of Torbay. Clearly, there's a focus in terms of the final mile areas. Those are the principal routes around the bay, and also those seafront and town centre areas. And you can see that with, for example, the innovative use of the robot mowing equipment as you first come into the bay on the dual carriageway, which is providing benefits not only in terms of performance but in safety for our operatives. But what we started off previously having was a grass-cutting regime, for example, Councillor, which was doing 4 cuts a year. What we're now achieving is cuts on our primary mile routes of every 2 weeks, and on our residential areas between 4 and 5 weeks. And that's a step change improvement right across. And I would really ask people to cast their mind back to several years ago and see that. I'd like it to be more regular than it currently is now. That's the aspiration, to try to get increased levels of performance in there, particularly in that early season bit where we go from that April, May period, where we've still got hangover of wet weather from the spring, but we're starting to get the sun come through that's causing the grass to balloon. But that's a step change change in level of improvement, the 2 weeks and the 4/5 weeks compared to 4 cuts a year. And I welcome the opportunity from overview and scrutiny to go through line by line of the step change in delivery that Brighter Bay has brought about. You're right, Councillor, that new street signs make an area look and feel alongside the increased road painting much greater, and I think that's a very good suggestion to take on board. And I'd look forward to also see, particularly given the discrete local knowledge that councillors have, as to whether there's an opportunity to use the funding through the ward budgets to work together with Swissco to do that, because there are going to be particular areas which could be most benefited. Take that one on board, and look forward to working with colleagues across the council to achieve that. Very positive suggestion there. Thank you, Chair. Thank
you very much. So just before we continue debate in the Cabinet, my apologies, because I've just been alerted that Councillor Law has been waiting patiently with her hand up. So please let me invite Councillor Law into the debate.
No, that's absolutely no problem. I just wanted to actually add that could we have the list circulated? Because my question was for this evening was where that list is, because it wasn't with the paperwork. So that's clearly been an oversight. And on grass cutting, all I'd like to say is that I've been really sad with how the grass cutting up by Ockham Farm, where all the orchids have been cut right back and have gone. So I guess grass cutting, and whether that you like it or not, it depends what side of the fence you're on. But if the list could be circulated, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We will absolutely circulate the list. And to be honest, it was finalised literally probably half an hour before the meeting, if not less than that. As you can see, Councillor Timon had an older copy in front of him. So let me come.
The bones of it.
Yeah, and obviously the crux and the details of everything that we put through tonight was discussed at overview and scrutiny at that meeting, and that overview and scrutiny meeting was basically based on the sharing that we'd done to Shadow Cabinet a fortnight previously. So let me bring Councillor Bay in.
Thank you so much again. Just a couple of very quick points. Yes, absolutely, that this list is simply a refinement of what was discussed at overview and scrutiny. The underspend arises from the financial year 2024-25, so it's not impacted by the the new government's spending that was announced, or the settlement that was announced in December, because that would be for the 25-26 financial year. So that this, in a sense, is an underspend achieved in a tighter budget round. So that's the first point. The second one, I think residents, it's interesting that I've got residents who would very much like to see things cut back more vigorously, but I quite appreciate where there are lovely spring flowers, there are residents who would rather they were left for a little while longer. But generally, what I've experienced is the appreciation of residents at the Bay is at last beginning to look tidier and neater, and people are very much appreciative of what we're doing. And the final point with the street signs, the road signs, my colleague Hazel Foster and I have first-hand experience of actually how well the road sign department, if there is such a thing, respond to continual requests for replacement at Daddy Hole Road. There are souvenir hunters who seem to be quite fascinated, I think, by the title of Daddy Hole Road. And the sign keeps disappearing, but Hazel Foster and myself, we battle for Wellswood, as you know, and I think twice in this term we've already managed to gain rather splendid and smart replacement signs for Daddy Hole Road. Quite why that gets taken away so frequently, who knows? But I thought I would just share that with you. It is an efficient replacement service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Timon.
Thank you. I'll pick up on a few points. Councillor Law, I'll find out about your orchids We have to be a little bit careful when we think about what's happening up in that sort of area, because the top part of Preston Down Road actually is in South Hams. The road surfaces that we get complaints very often about up there and not being kept are nothing to do with us. They're Devon County Council's. I don't know whether that was a bit of ground that we cut or not, but if you take just opposite Ockham Farm, where you've got Ockham House is not in Torbay, which is, I'm saying I don't know, but you need to be a little bit careful. I don't know who's done that. It might be us. I just wanted to also pick up on the situation regarding the 90,000 that we've dropped. That was after we had done more investigation. I've got information now that the spending of that money would be fully justified by savings that will be made. And as such, we probably will go ahead with the expenditure anyway, because it will be fully justified on an investor save basis and didn't need this. So it hasn't been dropped out of our thinking. It's been dropped out of this needing to fund it. So that covers that one. And then I think finally I'd like to say, well, thanks in a way to Councillors Bye and Billings, but actually I don't think you should be thanking me for these results. It springs to mind a little bit I think the old saying, don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. And I think here it's don't praise me, I'm just the messenger. The thanks go to all our officers around the council for looking after the budgets, not to our finance department primarily, or myself for reporting them, though we should also thank the finance department because they've done a very good job in maximising the way they've looked after treasury management and getting a significant benefit for our accounts through that as well. So, as I say, our thanks go out to our staff, I think not to members particularly in this regard, and I look forward to being able to bring good news when we come up with the Q1 reporting as well. I hope. I've not seen anything yet.
Thank you, Councillor. And we echo your comments, and we are more than happy to retract any good wishes that were passed to you earlier. So we're going to move on to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And at 6:22, that brings us to the end of this meeting. So I'd like to wish everyone a pleasant evening. And the meeting is closed. Thank you.